People who actually got married on an if we're both still single when we're 35 we'll get married deal. What's your story? We ended up getting married a lot sooner. He wasn't necessarily waiting around for me, but I realized I'd be devastated if he ended up with someone else and no longer had him as a constant friend in my life. Don't let the good ones get away. We've been married 13 years now and never regretted a minute of it. 2 of my friends have one of this. I hope they realize they are made for each other before then though. Tell them. I'm just gonna step this way scooches farther. / Christopher Walken voice, don't make me tell you. Again. About the scooching. This isn't mine, but I saved it because it just touched me deep. So here you go if you need a good cry. Edit. I want to thank everyone for the well wishes, but like I said, this isn't my story, it just punched me enough to save a long time ago when I first read it. Op has, as far as I know, deleted his account, and this original post was also deleted a while ago. The edit at the bottom is not mine, just included it from his post so you could see all that he has to say. Probably too late for this not to get buried, but I have a story about this. We met in college, and were instant best friends. I was 20, she was 18. We spent all our time together, and were briefly lovers, but we never formally dated because both of us were very much into being wild and free and enjoying our youth. We dated other people on and off, but we talked about it and agreed that a committed relationship between the 2 of us would be an all or nothing kind of thing. Since neither of us wanted to give up our hedonistic, promiscuous, irresponsible lifestyle, we made a point of not committing to a relationship. A few years went by that way, and we were very happy, right up until her sisters died. It was a car accident. They were 16 and 18, and both were killed in the crash. Dead on arrival at the hospital. My friend was utterly, completely devastated. It still hurts me to remember it, even now. Her father, though, was even more devastated, to the point where he was legitimately willing to let himself starve to death rather than try to go on living. She moved home, out of state, to take care of him. She cut ties with everyone for a while, even me. I didn't see her again for 2 years. She was so different after that. Before the accident, she'd always been the most joyful, exuberant, positive person I'd ever met. After she came back, she was quieter, sadder, maybe wiser. I wanted to be there for her more than I'd ever wanted anything in the world. Not being able to fix things for her, not being able to make it better, that hurt more than anything I could ever remember. I guess that's when I realized how in love with her I was. I told her that I loved her, that I wanted to be there with her, and she told me that she couldn't handle the idea of any kind of emotional connection for a while. Maybe a few years, she said. Maybe never. Maybe she'd never be able to open up emotionally again. She said she needed space from me, particularly from me. She said she needed to figure out what it meant to be alive in a world where her sisters were gone. She asked me to give her time, and I told her that I'd give her anything she wanted. She told me that she'd never been happier than she was when we were together. I told her the same. I told her that I understood, and that's when we made our pact. I was 25 then, and she was 23. We agreed, if she turned 30 and I turned 32, and if she had learned to heal, and if she hadn't fallen in love with someone else, and if I hadn't fallen in love with someone else, then we'd get married. So that's how we parted ways. She moved to Wyoming, to be alone. I moved to Germany, to get as far away from her as I could. We didn't keep in touch at first, but over the next few years we built up a correspondence. We wrote letters because we both liked writing letters. We emailed now and then. Sometimes we'd mail each other books that we thought the other would like. Years went on, and we became closer and closer. When I turned 30, I half-jokingly brought up our marriage pact. I told her that I hadn't ever fallen for anyone else. I didn't mention this, but I couldn't have fallen for anyone else. I always compared every other woman to her, and in my memory she was perfect. She replied that she was still very serious about our agreement, and that she'd never fallen in love with anyone else either. I asked her if she thought she had begun to heal, and she said she had, as much as a person could ever heal from something like that. A year later, she told me she'd like us to meet and spend some time together, to see if the spark was still there. It was. She was living in California at that time, and I found a job there. I'd always wanted to live in California anyway. I proposed to her 6 months later, and she smiled and told me no fair, that I had to wait another few months, when she'd be turning 30. I thought it was silly, but at that point things were going so well that a few months didn't seem like they could matter at all. But I'm crying now, so I'll have to wrap this up quickly. She died. That's how the story ends. She was hit by a drunk driver and spent 2 days in the ICU before her body gave out. I went to her funeral. I spoke to her father, but I barely remember what we said. I've never spoken to him since. I don't have the willpower to make myself find out how he's doing. That will be 4 years ago this November. I'm in therapy and trying to learn how to have feelings again, other than blank, mindless, miserable rage. I often wonder if this is what it felt like for her. She made progress. She learned to feel again. That thought is what keeps me going. She did it. She'd want me to do it. That's it. That's the story. It's a shitty story, and I hate it. Edit. This is very difficult for me, in that I didn't expect to go back and reread this, but all the replies dinging on my phone were too much to ignore. It's hard to explain what it's like to only have two emotional states, anger and nothing. Someone said this reminded them of a Nicholas Sparks story, and here's the difference between life and a love story. In a book, she'd have regained consciousness before she died. In a movie, she'd have opened her eyes and looked at me one last time. I wouldn't have had to see her all smashed up with tubes in her throat. I'd have had a chance to tell her how much I loved her instead of the last words I said to her being, "Don't forget to pick up Scout's flea medicine." I'd be noble and tragic now, instead of a miserable shell of a person just trying and failing to believe that anything could ever be worth anything ever again. I'm sorry. I'm so angry. I want to delete this post, but my therapist would tell me that this is progress, somehow. Thank you all for your kind words. If I have any advice to give, it's to go hold the people you love while there's still time. I have to go take some medicine now. Please have a very nice night. Thank you again for being kind. I remember seeing this story. I hope they've made more progress. Me too. That is a deep depression. The nothing or rage. I've been there for as much as months at a time, but never for years. I want to know who up is and see if they like or would learn my favorite games. Then join up in online groups to play and trash talk and support each other. I want to be Op's friend, as much or as little as that can mean for them. I remember seeing that over a year ago, so I don't know. But I'm sure it's still on Reddit somewhere, so somebody probably could find it and the Op. A co-worker of mine up and left his girlfriend, who was also working there, of 6 years, to move from AK to FL to go through with the pact he made with the other girl in high school. I honestly don't know how they're doing. The ex, however, lost a 185-pound stressor, so I'm glad she's doing exceptionally well. Wow, this is crazy. That must have been a shock for the girlfriend. It threw the whole staff for a loop, that's for sure. She is far better off without him by all means though. Seems like she just dodged a bullet then, or the bullet dodged her. I did. But we got married 10 years earlier. We met at an Ink Master finale. We immediately connected. He lived in New York, Florida. I went back home and we kept in touch. Made a promise if by the time we were 35 we'd marry each other. I was 25 at the time. Things intensified so much we truly believed we were meant for each other. I moved to Illinois to take care of my sick grandma. 3 months after meeting he flew there to visit and we got married. After a few more visits he moved there too. 4 years later and we have 2 kids. Was it the season where Dave Navarro had to mention living moss every chance he got? I'm not sure, but it was season 7. If we are still married when we are 36, we'll get a divorce. I recently met a guy who has this agreement with his fiancée. They both agreed that most divorces occur 5 to 7 years in, so at 5 years into the marriage they're both going to assess the situation and decide whether they want to stay in or back out. Their prenup has something in it that allows one party to leave with their own assets without fault anytime in the first 5 years. It's a strange way to start a marriage, but they're both very methodical people and both like the idea of it. Fucking engineers. I had that deal with a girl I was so in love with in HS/college. I, an idiot, lost touch and married someone else in my 20s. That went down in tremendous flames and as far as I know she was still single. We haven't talked for many years. Get back in touch. This is the correct answer. Not exactly the same, but when I was 21 and he was 24 I said to my friend, if we're not married by the time you're 30, do you want to get married? He said no. Well, we started actually dating a couple months after and this year he will be 30 in May and our wedding is planned for June *, pending COVID-19 lets us gather 30 people and travel within our country. Well, since people are more concerned about your cake day and not what you just said, I guess I'll be the one who says it. Congrats on your wedding. Sorry about the inconvenient times, but all that matters is you two being together. Imagine sharing a story as sweet as that and the only comments you get are happy cake day. Hope all works out for your wedding. Kind of. We left our spouses around the same time, not for each other, and decided to share a house. We got to taking one night and decided we each had all the things the other was looking for, plus we got along really well. We were in our mid-30s by then and sick of the dating scene, so we just laid it out like a business arrangement. What started off as an arrangement eventually evolved into something extremely serious and passionate. We've been together now for almost 7 years and married for almost 1. We are extremely in love and I have zero regrets. Just finished because this is my first life on Netflix. The show must be based on your life. That show really gave me a different perspective on life, marriage, and love. Highly recommend to anyone who just wants a new take on the romantic aspects of life. My BF put something spooky on TV for the past few hours. I'm about to power through this now because it sounds delightful. My dad married at 45. He had known my mom since childhood. They studied together too. My mom often narrates to me tales of how my dad would hit up on her and when my mom would approach him and ask what happened, he would shy away. LOL. I asked my mom, what took them so much time to marry? She replied it was her decision. She told my dad to get well settled financially. My family wasn't always well off. They had their struggles. My mom had suggested that if they are planning for baby or marriage, there should be no problems for the baby. Haha, I am glad that baby was me, face with tears of joy. My dad makes fun of me by saying, you won't get a girlfriend if you don't succeed. Even if you get, they will leave you if you are unsuccessful. LOL. I am quite sure he does not mean it. Maybe he does it to motivate me to do well. Regardless, I asked him, would my mom leave you if your business falls? He said, acting smart. Huh. She would never leave me. Grinning face with sweat. Edit. Fixed few words. People were misunderstanding. My really good friend and I were joking about this in our early 20s, and I got an idea how she really felt about me when she said, yeah, if we're both single at 70, let's get married. You have to make a counter offer in those situations. Come back at her with 40, she'll drop to 60, and then you can both meet in the middle at 50. Will you still need me when I'm 64? You'll be older too, and if you say the word I could stay with you. Weird couple my wife knew had such a pact and followed through. Girl was a really introverted, quiet, homely type. Sweetest girl. But she never had a boyfriend as far as I knew. And we saw her off and on for 6 or 7 years. Then suddenly out of nowhere she invited us to her wedding. Anyways, it was to a guy we had met a couple of times who was one of her friends who seemed very much like her. My wife teased her that more must have been going on all that time. But she was straight up about it, and said no, they just decided it was time. Conversation was something like, yeah, you know how people have pacts to get married if neither of them are till they hit _____. Well, we just decided it really wasn't going to happen for either of us, and to cut that short, basically we were just like, cool. And then left it at that. Anyways, she married him, they looked happy. The speeches were a bit odd, they didn't really talk about love but a lot about how they were marrying their best friend. They are still together, it's gotta be at least 5 years, and they have a little kid. Last we saw them they looked happy, and that's all that matters really. Friends with tax benefits. Also, sex when you are completely comfortable with the other person is the best. Yeah, me and my wife are like that. Completely comfortable with each other. Same thing with me and your wife. Perfectly comfortable. Your wife and I aren't very comfortable, but we make do. My partner and I were close friends for 12 years before we got married. Through many friendships and relationships with other people, including one of us following a former lover across the country and the other being briefly engaged, we stayed just friends for a very long time. On New Year's Eve in 2007-8, at the ripe old age of 23, we drunkenly made a pact to get married to each other if we weren't married by 30. Long story short, we didn't start dating until we both turned 30, but we got married pretty quickly after we started dating. Just celebrated 5 years of marriage, and we have a 2-year-old. It's unconventional, but so are we, and it's ours. Kinda think these pacts really mean I'm interested in you and will marry you, but I'm going to get a few things out of my system first. 50/50th shot of being that or a joke. Honestly, it's not a horrible way to go about that. That way nobody is hurt or cheated on. I guess sometimes maybe people have to get it out and then they can settle. A lot of people are afraid of commitment, so I can see how they could see this to be a solution. One of my friends from high school had a deal with this with her high school boyfriend. Thus, when they turned 30, they had a baby together. Unfortunately, she was also a drug addict and ended up committing a felony, going to prison, and I'm pretty sure the kid is with him, and even though she's out of prison now she can't have her daughter with her at whatever housing she is at. Do not recommend. At least, not without stipulations, apparently. Don't become a drug addict, be able to hold down your life and then some, etc. Do not recommend the marriage or becoming a drug addict and fucking up your life and the lives of those around you. I asked my pact if we're still on if anything happens. She was insulted. I questioned it. It's still on. Edit, everyone breathe. We're both in relationships. It's interesting that you have your second wife on standby. This man is a legend and has prepared for the future.